Some men run from the world. Others think the world has finally forgotten them. William Harrow believed he had buried his past in the silence of the valley until the evening a woman stepped out of the trees with a child in her arms and a request that would change the rest of his life. Before we ride any further into this story, don't forget to like the video and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. The last band of daylight drained slowly across the valley as William carried an armful of split wood toward his cabin. The cold had come down fast, sharp and biting, stiffening his fingers even through the cracked leather of his gloves. He walked with the steady rhythm of a man who relied on routine to keep his thoughts from wandering too far. Over the years, his world had narrowed to work, silence, and careful distance from anything that required more than practical commitment. He had chosen this land because few people rode this far west unless they were desperate or lost. He stacked the wood beside the door and straightened, feeling the familiar pull across his shoulders, earned from years in the saddle and behind plow handles. His hand reached for the latch when something shifted near the tree line. Not wind, not deer. A movement too deliberate to belong to chance. He turned his head slightly, letting his eyes adjust to the fading light beneath the pines. A woman stood half hidden behind a leaning trunk. Her body was angled, tense, like she could bolt at the smallest threat. A child was pressed tightly against her chest, wrapped in a blanket too thin for the cold settling over the valley. Her breathing was shallow, uneven, the kind that comes from exhaustion layered over fear. Her clothes were worn and hand-mended, carrying the story of miles traveled without rest. William didn't call out. Years on the trail had taught him that a raised voice could shatter fragile trust. Instead, he lowered his hands slowly, keeping them clear of his belt and rifle, and stepped slightly away from the doorway. The movement was intentional. If she came forward, it would be by her own choosing. Long ago, in a storm on the cattle drive, he had made a decision too quickly. A man had died because of it. Since that night, William never forced anyone into a corner they couldn't step back from. The woman studied him with sharp, unblinking focus. Dust streaked her face, but her eyes were alert, measuring him for danger. She didn't look fragile. She looked like someone who had refused to break, for the sake of the child she carried. Her thoughts were visible in the tightness of her jaw. Safety or another mistake? Her legs trembled, not from fear, but from fatigue, as she tightened her hold on the boy. William opened the cabin door wider and stepped completely aside. He didn't wave her in. He didn't speak. He simply left space. After a long moment, she emerged from the trees. Each step across the open ground was slow and deliberate. The child's small hand slipped from the blanket, clutching at the cloth with the instinct of someone who had known too much uncertainty. When she reached the porch, she paused again. William met her gaze without softening his expression. He would not offer pity, only steadiness. She crossed the threshold. Inside, the stove gave off steady heat. The cabin was simple, a table, 2 chairs, a narrow cot. Tools hung in careful order along one wall. She moved instinctively toward the warmth. Her shoulders lowered just slightly as the heat touched her face. The child sagged against her, too tired to lift his head. William opened a trunk and took out a folded blanket, placing it on the chair closest to her. Her eyes flicked toward it, guarded, waiting for expectation. He stepped back and removed his gloves without looking directly at her. Only then did she reach for the blanket. She wrapped it around the child first, her hands trembling as the cold released its grip. When she finally spoke, her voice was low and rough. "We won't stay long." It wasn't defiance. It was caution. William's reply was even, steady as he'd speak to a skittish horse. "Heat's here. Night's coming quick. You can rest." Her eyes softened, not with trust, but with the smallest thread of relief. A direct answer. No hidden demand. He adjusted the stove vent and gave her space. He didn't ask where she came from. The tension around her mouth, the way she positioned herself between him and the child, told him questions would only tighten the air. She watched him carefully, reading his movements. She noted the lack of urgency, the absence of judgment, the respectful distance he kept. It wasn't shallow kindness. It was restraint. She lowered herself to the floor near the stove, settling the boy in her lap. His breathing steadied as warmth soaked into him. She brushed his hair back gently, a touch that revealed how fiercely she had fought to keep him alive. William sat at the table, trimming the lantern wick so it wouldn't sputter later. He moved slowly, mindful that sudden gestures in a small room could unsettle someone who had been running for too long. He wasn't used to company, yet irritation never touched him. Instead, something unfamiliar pressed quietly against his ribs, a protective instinct he hadn't felt in years. He wondered what had driven her here. Raiders, tribal conflict, something worse. But he kept the thoughts from his face. She didn't look away from him now. Even as the warmth eased her posture, she remained ready, prepared to shield her son at the slightest misstep. The stove crackled softly. Outside, wind slid low across the valley. They did not speak again. Her name was Tala, though she hadn't given it yet. William didn't ask. Names belonged to trust, and trust was earned slowly. For now, she and the child were warm, and William had already decided, without ceremony, that he would not send them back into the dark. The door remained shut. Night deepened around the cabin, and inside, 3 lives adjusted quietly to one another's presence. Dawn crept across the floor in a pale line of light. William woke before the sun cleared the ridge. As always, but the room felt different. The soft breathing of 2 unfamiliar souls changed. The rhythm he had grown used to in his years alone. He sat up carefully, listening to the faint hiss of cooling embers. Tala was awake. She sat near the hearth, her back straight, the child wrapped securely in the blanket. Her eyes tracked him, still cautious, but no longer sharp with immediate alarm. Exhaustion had settled deeper into her bones now that safety, however temporary, had held through the night. William moved to the stove and coaxed flame from the embers. He kept his movements measured. She watched his hands and recognized intention in the quiet care he took not to startle. "There's food," he said at last. "If you want some." He didn't motion. He didn't insist. She hesitated. Accepting food could create debt. After a moment, she gave a small nod. It wasn't trust, but it was a beginning. He stepped outside to gather wood, the cold slicing through the morning air. His eyes scanned the horizon without conscious thought. Today, the vigilance had purpose beyond himself. Inside, Tala rose slowly and placed her son on a folded blanket near the stove. She kept her body angled toward him. Every sound felt louder in a place that wasn't hers. Could she stay more than one night? Would danger follow? She had spent months moving, losing shelter, losing certainty. Standing still felt foreign. William returned with wood. She tensed, then eased when his posture remained the same, steady, unthreatening. "We can work," she said quietly. "We won't stay for free." "I didn't ask for payment," he replied. Night fell. "That's reason enough." She searched his face for motive and found none. Only a man shaped by solitude and something unspoken he carried like weight across his shoulders. The pot simmered. He placed a bowl before her. She fed her son carefully, supporting his back. The boy watched William between bites, measuring him in the quiet way children do. William pretended not to notice. After eating, Tala washed the bowl. He didn't stop her. He stepped outside again, leaving the door open just enough that she could hear him moving nearby. She stood in the doorway, her child on her hip, watching him scan the land. She understood that kind of readiness. It wasn't fear, it was memory. "He might let us stay," she whispered to her son. William returned and caught the shift in her expression. Not hope, not yet, but the possibility of it. "You can rest today," he said. "No rush to decide." Time, he was offering time. For the first time since stepping from the trees, her shoulders eased not from exhaustion, but from the fragile outline of safety. The morning settled into rhythm. The cabin no longer felt like a place she was merely passing through. It felt like something waiting to be decided. The sun climbed higher, melting the frost from the fence rails and softening the hard edge of the morning. William sat on the cabin step, working oil into a worn leather bridle, his hands steady, his thoughts quieter than they had been in years. The boy lingered near the doorway, watching him with serious curiosity. After a moment, the child took a few brave steps forward and stopped at William's knee. He didn't speak. He simply placed his small hand against the leather strap as if asking to help. William glanced toward Tala before moving. She gave the smallest nod. "Like this," he said gently, guiding the boy's fingers along the curve of the bridle. The child copied him, slow and careful. A faint smile touched William's mouth before he could stop it. Tala watched from the doorway, something shifting behind her guarded expression. She had seen men demand loyalty, demand gratitude, demand submission. She had never seen one offer patience without asking for anything in return. By afternoon, the valley was still. No riders, no smoke in the distance. No sign that the world Tala had fled was closing in. William rose and crossed the yard toward her. He stopped a few steps away, giving her the same space he had given that first night. "You're not being hunted," he said quietly. "I've seen no tracks but ours." Tala studied him for a long moment. Then, for the first time, she spoke without caution shaping every word. "I was hidden," she said, "after my husband fell. Some wanted me to marry again for protection. Others wanted the land he left. I chose to leave instead." William didn't interrupt. She held her son closer. "I can survive alone." "I have, but he—" Her voice faltered just slightly. "He deserves more than running." The wind moved gently through the grass between them. "I won't force you to stay," William said, "and I won't ask you to leave." He paused, choosing his next words with care. "If you decide this place is enough, then we build something steady. Not out of debt, not out of fear." Tala stepped closer, close enough to see the truth in his eyes. There was no hunger there, no claim, only a quiet man offering a future without chains. "You would take another man's child as your own?" she asked. William looked down at the boy, who was still gripping the edge of his coat. "A child shouldn't pay for grown men's mistakes," he said simply. Silence stretched between them, but it no longer felt uncertain. Tala reached out and placed her hand over his, firm and deliberate. "Then I will stay," she said. "Not because I must, because I choose to." The decision settled into the valley like something meant to be there all along. Weeks later, the cabin no longer echoed with solitude. The boys' laughter carried across the yard. Tala's steady presence turned wood and stone into something warmer than shelter. And when spring edged into the hills, bringing new life to the valley, Tala stood beside William and placed his hand against her stomach. "This time," she said softly, "we build from peace." William covered her hand with his own, understanding the weight of what she was offering. Not obligation, not survival. A future. The valley that once held only silence now held a family, chosen, not claimed. And for the first time since the storm that had haunted him, William Harrow no longer felt alone in the world.